So, in an article I was reading, and I've heard this on some other headlines, is that Trump wants to lean on the allies to help with the Straits of Hormuz situation. So, there's a couple of points to take apart with this. He specifically named NATO and saying that the NATO countries were more of a beneficiary of these straits, of the passageway of these straits, more than the United States is economically, which is true. It's even more true for East Asia, by the way, which has been mentioned many times before if you're paying attention. So there's a couple of points to take here. Number one, this war was started by Israel and the United States. Okay. Now, regardless if you agree with the war or not, if you look at the details and you look past the propaganda, this was poorly executed. They're saying, "Oh, the straits are open." Hegseth says the straits are open. You just, have to worry about the tankers being shot at going through there. Imagine if I said the bank is open, but there's a robbery in progress. It's like what he said was mind-blowingly stupid. Effectively, those straits are closed. Okay. That's why they're asking, hey, let's get the NATO countries involved and let's help open the straits. Well, again, like I said, poor planning. If you're a NATO ally, you're looking at this and saying, okay, the United States has been unable to completely protect the Gulf countries for sure. Israel is getting hit with missiles. Again, there's a lot of censorship out there. If you're in any of these countries, you're not supposed to mention this because they're not free countries. And arguably, yes, it's a war situation, and they would make the argument that in a war you would curtail people's freedom because you have to make, emergency measures. But if we're being honest, Israel is being pummeled, at least according to the sources that I have. I've seen some videos and pictures of this. The Gulf states are getting pummeled, and Iran has the ability to hit them more. They could take out all their oil infrastructure if they wanted to. Their drones are arguably effective. But nonetheless, pretty effective for something that only costs $40,000 to make. And you're shooting these with interceptors that are multi-million-dollar interceptors. I've seen reports that Israel is running out of interceptors for their Iron Dome. So, like I said, very poor planning. So you're looking at this, the Gulf countries aren't protected by the United States. So if you're a NATO country, if you're Italy, if you're Germany, you're thinking to yourself, oh, wait a second, the United States, what ability do they have to protect us? In this case, against Russia? Not really. Russia has a lot of missiles too. They could probably hit Germany. If they shoot enough of them. The United States, according to what I've heard, again, I'm no expert and I'm not an insider, but according to some reports, is running out of their stockpiles of missiles and interceptors. So if you're a NATO country, you question, is it really worth it? Before they were under the largesse of the U.S. military, they didn't have to spend that much on their military because the United States was defending them for, practically for free, right? They were getting something of a free ride militarily with regard to their security. But maybe that's not so effective. I'm not saying that the United States doesn't have a military. Obviously, it's still the largest military in the world. But what is their ability to defend in this stage of warfare, in the age of missiles and drones? The United States is not set up to defend against something like that, and we're seeing it right now. So that's piece one. The second part of this is, you look at NATO. If you're the United States and the other countries are not running to your side militarily, from the American perspective, what is the value of NATO? Why are we in NATO? Why are we in an alliance with these other countries? I've said it before many times. It's very one-sided. We do a lot more for them than they do for us. Now, maybe as a percentage of GDP, maybe you can look at a country like Poland. Poland does pull its weight, and that's because historically they have issues with Russia. maybe with the exception of, countries like Poland, or I think Lithuania is another one. But you look at a country like Germany that basically doesn't have much of its own military. You look at the UK, which has kind of gone to the wayside, quite a bit. And also, by the way, these countries are not entirely free countries. They're cracking down on free speech. Israel is a theocracy. It's not as much of a theocracy compared to the other Middle Eastern countries. So I suppose there's an argument to be had that it's a freer country. But, they're not American style free countries. And yet we're defending them from what? Against Russia. Now, Russia is historically not a free country, but in the age right now, I mean, they're cracking down. You look at places like Germany where they're, quote unquote, they're, the AfD people get killed, right? So you got your opposition being liquidated. You got people being arrested for their speech, for quote unquote hate speech. You're not much better than Russia. So it really calls into question all this. Not to mention the United States. I mean, we're keeping a distance from the Straits because Iran can hit them with missiles, right? So why would other countries put themselves in this risk for a war that was started by the United States? I would imagine that right now that a lot of countries are starting to rethink their alliances, rethinking their relationship with the United States. And by the way, if there's no NATO, there's no EU, because the countries in Europe are not militarily on the same side. They're going to start looking after their own national goals, their own national interests. And you could say goodbye to the EU under that circumstance. But, I mean, like I said, if you're these other countries, you're going to start thinking, okay, I need to rearm. I need to look after my own interests. These ideas like you can't buy Russian oil. I guarantee you people will buy Russian oil before they let the lights go out. Trump railed against globalism, and for good reason. There's some good reasons to be anti-globalism, but he's going to kill it very quickly with these actions. The high oil prices and the demonstration of not being prepared for this type of warfare.